Every night the teenage son entered his mother's room. But when a neighbor overheard disturbing, intimate-sounding moans and warned the father, he set up a hidden camera. What the footage captured in that dark room shattered their family in ways no one could have imagined, and what came next was beyond. Stay tuned to find out what really happened in that room. Hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the shocking truth. The clock hit 3:30 a.m., and Michael's shift at the factory had just ended. His feet ached, and his eyes stung from exhaustion, but the thought of coming home to Isabella and Landon always eased the weariness. The quiet hum of the night was his comfort. The long hours were worth it for that peaceful moment when he stepped inside the door. Home was supposed to be his sanctuary, a place where, no matter what happened, there would be warmth and Isabella's soft voice, the laughter of Landon to greet him. Michael and Isabella had adopted Landon when he was just a baby, raising him as their own. Michael loved the boy like his own flesh and blood. For years, their family life was a peaceful routine: work, home, laughter, and the shared joy of watching Landon grow. But recently, that peace had started to unravel. Isabella had become distant. At first, Michael chalked it up to stress, the normal ebbs and flows of marriage. But lately, her behavior was different, too different. She was cold, distracted, and often avoided his eyes when he asked about her day. It wasn't like her to be so distant, and Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As he entered the house that night, the familiar comfort was replaced by something darker. The air felt heavier, colder even. Isabella wasn't downstairs, as she often was, waiting with a cup of warm coffee and a tired but sweet smile. Michael's eyes darted toward the stairs leading to their bedroom. A small frown creased his face, but he dismissed it. Maybe she's just asleep early. Upstairs, the hallway was dim, just a sliver of light peeking from under the bedroom door. He turned the knob softly, not wanting to disturb her. But as soon as he stepped inside, his heart dropped. There it was, a condom wrapper, crumpled and discarded near the edge of their bed. His blood ran cold. That wasn't his. His mind raced, but for a moment he stood frozen. He blinked, trying to convince himself that he was imagining things. No, this can't be right. A surge of anger rushed through his veins, but he forced it down, clenching his fists until his knuckles turned white. "Isabella," he called, his voice lower, darker than usual. There was no answer. Michael stepped closer to the bed, eyeing the wrapper with growing disbelief, feeling the weight of it press against his chest. How? Who? His mind churned with possibilities, each worse than the last, his gut twisted with anger, betrayal, and the sour taste of jealousy creeping in. He stormed to the bathroom door and knocked, harder than he intended. "Isabella, are you in there?" From the other side of the door, a pause, too long for comfort. The doorknob turned, and she emerged, her face pale, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that second, Michael swore he saw something flicker in her gaze. Fear, guilt. He wasn't sure, but it was enough to make his heart pound louder. "What?" she asked, her voice defensive, too sharp for such a small word. Michael didn't respond immediately. He just stared at her, his mind battling between wanting to confront her and hoping he was wrong. "What is this?" he finally spat, holding up the wrapper. Isabella's eyes widened, but only for a split second. Then she shrugged. "That's yours?" she said, too casually, too quickly. "You know you always use those." The lie hit him like a slap to the face. Michael hesitated, his anger flickering for just a moment. His jaw tightened as he stared at her. "I don't use this brand," he finally said, his voice steady but cold. "I never buy these." Isabella didn't flinch. "Well, maybe you grabbed the wrong box last time." Her tone was too calm, too practiced. She moved past him, acting as if the conversation was over, as if his questions were nothing more than an annoyance. "You expect me to believe that?" His voice was low but filled with venom. "What the hell is going on here? What are you hiding from me?" Isabella's eyes narrowed, and she turned away from him, heading back into the bedroom. Michael followed her, not willing to let this go. "I'm not hiding anything," she snapped, but her voice wavered, the sharpness now sounding desperate. "I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this. You're just tired from work. You're imagining things." But Michael knew better. He saw the shift in her, the coldness, the distance that had slowly crept between them over the past few weeks. The small moments that once felt like home now felt foreign, like they didn't belong to him anymore. Isabella wasn't the same woman who used to wait up for him every night. She wasn't the woman who kissed him softly when he came home, who laughed at his tired jokes, or who looked at him with the kind of love that made him forget the long hours and aching bones. No, this was someone else. Someone hiding something. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he clenched his fists. His mind flashed back to the times Isabella had been cold lately, distant. The way she avoided his eyes at dinner, how she'd been spending more time alone, brushing off his questions. And now this. "I'm not crazy, Isabella," he said, his voice quieter now, but colder. "I'm not imagining this. Something's wrong. You've changed. You're not the same." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence was enough. Michael turned away, fists still clenched, anger simmering just below the surface. Michael hadn't slept all night. He'd tossed and turned on the worn leather couch in the living room, but every time he closed his eyes, the image of that crumpled condom wrapper flickered behind his eyelids. The darkness felt suffocating, and his mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying Isabella's too casual denial over and over. The more he thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. By dawn, Michael had given up on sleep altogether. He swung his legs off the couch, feeling the stiffness in his back and the dull ache of fatigue in his bones. But he pushed himself up anyway. Staying still, lying there in the quiet, only made the storm in his head grow louder. The sun hadn't yet risen fully when he stepped outside into the backyard. The garden was a small, modest space. Nothing like the grand lawns he'd seen in magazines, but it was his. He'd spent hours working on it over the years, finding solace in the simple act of pulling weeds, trimming hedges, and planting vegetables. Today, though, he barely noticed the state of the garden. His hands worked mechanically, snipping away at the overgrown branches, but his mind was elsewhere, tangled up in suspicion and doubt. He hadn't heard Isabella stir inside the house, not a single creak of the floorboards upstairs. Maybe she was still asleep, or maybe she was avoiding him, just as she had last night. Michael's gut churned, the gnawing feeling in his chest tightening its grip. He needed to calm down. He needed answers, but for now, he needed to clear his head. He hadn't even noticed the presence at the edge of the fence until a voice called out, soft but insistent. "Michael! Hey, Michael! Morning!" Gaza said, leaning on the fence. There was something in his tone, something off, that immediately caught Michael's attention. "Morning," Michael replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. He tried to shake off the tension. "How's it going?" Gaza looked at him for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing his words. Finally, he spoke. "You all right, Michael? You look like you didn't get much sleep." Michael shrugged. "Yeah, long night. Couldn't sleep." Gaza nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. I was going to ask you about something. Strange, I heard last night. It's not really my business, but I figured you should know. Michael's pulse quickened, and the garden around him seemed to shrink. He didn't say anything, just waited for Gaza to continue. It was late, Gaza said, glancing back at his house as if to make sure no one else was listening. I was walking the dog, around 2 a.m. maybe, and I heard noises coming from your place, from upstairs. He paused, watching Michael's face carefully. What kind of noises? Michael's voice was too calm, even to his own ears. Well, Gaza hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. It sounded like someone, together. And I figured, well, you'd be at work around that time, right? Michael's jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. The air seemed thicker now, suffocating. Yeah, I was at work, he said, his voice low, strained. Gaza shifted uncomfortably, as if he regretted bringing it up. I didn't mean to cause trouble, but I thought you should know. I've been your neighbor long enough. I figured I'd say something. Michael nodded stiffly. Thanks, he muttered, though his mind was racing. The noise Gaza had heard, it confirmed his worst fears, didn't it? He had already sensed something was wrong, but now, with this, it was no longer a suspicion. It was proof. He turned away from the neighbor, muttering a quick goodbye, and made his way back to the house, his heart thudding against his chest. Inside, the house felt smaller, claustrophobic. His mind spun with thoughts, flashes of Isabella's face, her cool dismissals, Landon's silence. The walls felt like they were closing in, trapping him inside the nightmare that had become his life. He needed to know the truth. He needed to see it with his own eyes. The next night, before he left for his shift, Michael placed a hidden camera in their bedroom. He didn't want to do it, didn't want to be the kind of man who spied on his wife, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. He had to know what was happening when he wasn't home. As he set the camera in place, his hands trembled. He felt like he was crossing a line, like there was no going back once he took this step. But Michael had no choice. His mind wouldn't let him rest until he had answers. With one last glance at the room, Michael left for work, his heart heavy, knowing that by the time he came back, everything might be different. The camera sat on the table, cold and silent. Michael stared at it for a long moment, his hands hovering just above the play button, afraid of what he might see. His heart hammered in his chest, the weight of his suspicions pressing down harder with each passing second. The drive home had been a blur, the minutes ticking away as Michael's mind raced with the possibilities. With a shaky breath, Michael pressed play. The screen flickered to life, grainy and dim, the camera's angle just wide enough to capture the bed, the door, and the shadows that moved through the room. At first, it was silent, just the stillness of the empty bedroom, a place Michael had once considered his sanctuary. But then, as the minutes crept by, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly from down the hall. And then, Landon appeared. Michael froze, his pulse quickening. His son, their son, entered the room quietly, glancing around as if to make sure no one was watching. His movements were hesitant, almost unsure, but he continued forward, heading toward the bed, toward Isabella. Michael's jaw clenched, his breath catching in his throat. The camera's angle didn't give him a full view, but it was enough. He could see Isabella in the bed, her figure barely visible under the sheets. The way Landon moved toward her. And then came the sound that shattered whatever hope Michael had left, that this was all some misunderstanding. Isabella's voice, soft, almost a whisper, calling Landon's name. It was like a knife twisting in Michael's gut. He couldn't make out all the words, but the tone. It was wrong. It wasn't the tone of a mother speaking to her son. It was something else entirely. Michael's vision blurred with fury. His hands trembled as he paused the video, unable to watch any more. That was all he needed to see, more than enough to confirm his worst fears. He slammed the laptop shut, the room falling into a suffocating silence. For a long moment he just sat there, his mind numb with disbelief. How could this happen? How could they, Isabella, his wife, and Landon, the boy they'd raised together, how could they betray him like this? He felt sick, the bile rising in his throat as the weight of their betrayal settled deep in his chest. The anger bubbled up, sharp and vicious, until it was all he could feel. Without thinking, Michael stood, grabbing his keys from the table. His hands were shaking, his vision narrowed with rage as he stormed out of the house and into his car. He had to confront them. Now. There was no waiting. No more pretending that everything was fine. The drive back home was a blur of red lights and anger, the tension in Michael's chest building with every mile. By the time he reached the driveway, his knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so hard. He slammed the door shut behind him and made his way up the stairs, his heart pounding in his ears. The house was quiet, but Michael could feel the tension in the air. Isabella was in the kitchen, her back turned to him, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. He didn't call her name. He didn't need to. The moment she heard his footsteps, she turned, her face pale and wide-eyed. "Michael, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. But Michael didn't answer. Instead, he threw the laptop onto the counter, the screen flickering back to life as the paused video appeared before them. Isabella's eyes darted to the screen, and in an instant, Michael saw the fear in her eyes. "You..." Michael's voice was thick with rage. "You and Landon, how could you?" Isabella's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked trapped, like a deer caught in headlights. For a brief second, Michael thought she might try to deny it again, to lie to him the way she had before. But there was no room for lies now. The truth was laid bare for both of them to see. "This isn't what it looks like, Michael," she finally said, her voice cracking with desperation. "Not what it looks like." Michael's voice rose, trembling with fury. "Then what is it, Isabella? What the hell is going on between you two?" Isabella stood across from him, her face pale, her eyes wide, with the kind of fear that only made Michael's rage burn hotter. Michael's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "How could you?" His words came out thick with betrayal. "How could you do this to me?" Isabella opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out at first. When she finally found her voice, it was shaky, barely a whisper. "Michael, you don't understand." "I don't understand," Michael barked, his voice rising with every syllable. "What don't I understand, Isabella? That you've been lying to me. That you and Landon..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was too vile, too incomprehensible. "It's not what you think," Isabella said, taking a tentative step forward, but Michael recoiled, his anger now spilling out in waves. His entire body trembled with the force of his emotions, the betrayal cutting him deeper than anything he had ever known. "Don't come near me!" Michael shouted, stepping back, pointing an accusing finger at her. "I trusted you. I loved you. And now this?" Just then, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Landon, having heard the shouting, burst into the room, his face a mask of confusion. "What's going on? What's happening?" His eyes darted between Michael and Isabella, his voice tinged with panic. Michael's head snapped toward Landon, and in that moment, all of his rage found a new target. His adopted son. The boy he had raised and loved as his own. The boy he thought he could trust. "You!" Michael shouted, storming toward Landon, his finger still pointing like a loaded gun. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what you've been doing? In my house? With my wife?" Landon's eyes widened in shock, and he stepped back, holding his hands up defensively. "What are you talking about, Dad? I don't know what you're saying." "You don't know," Michael seethed, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "I've seen it, Landon. I saw you, in our bedroom, in the middle of the night. Don't stand there and lie to me." Landon's face went pale, his confusion only deepening as he shook his head. "I didn't, Dad. I swear, I didn't do anything." "Don't lie to me," Michael roared, his voice cracking with the weight of his anger. His body moved on instinct, driven by the overwhelming need to release the fury that had been building inside him since the moment he watched the video. He lunged forward, fists clenched, ready to strike. Isabella screamed, "Michael, no!" She threw herself between them, her hands outstretched, trying to shield Landon from the full force of Michael's wrath. Michael's fist stopped inches from Landon's face, his body shaking with the effort of pulling back. His mind raced, his heart pounding so hard in his chest that he thought it might explode. Landon staggered backward, wide-eyed, trembling, still not fully understanding what was happening. Tears welled up in his eyes, the sheer disbelief of the situation overwhelming him. "Dad, please." Landon's voice cracked, his hands shaking as he tried to reach out to Michael. "I don't know what's going on. I don't do anything. You have to believe me." But Michael wasn't listening. His anger was a storm now, uncontrollable, consuming. All he could see was betrayal. All he could feel was the pain of being lied to. The image of his son and his wife, tearing apart everything he had built. Isabella stood between them, her own tears streaming down her face, her body trembling as she tried to speak. "Michael, please, you have to listen. It's not what you think." "What am I supposed to think, Isabella?" Michael snapped, his voice raw with emotion. "You expect me to just stand here and believe that nothing happened? That this," he gestured wildly to the laptop, "is nothing?" Isabella's sobs broke through her words, her desperation clear as she tried to explain. "I swear to you, Michael, it's not what it looks like. Landon, he's been struggling. He's not well. He's been confused ever since his girlfriend passed. I didn't know how to help him, and then it got worse. I was only trying to comfort him." "Comfort him?" Michael spat, the words dripping with venom. "That is how you comfort him? Letting him sneak into our bedroom at night? Letting him—" No, it wasn't like that," Isabella cried, her voice breaking as she clutched at his arm. "He doesn't even remember what he's doing, Michael. He's been sleepwalking, confused, thinking I was someone else. I was trying to help him get through it, but it's gotten out of control." Michael's eyes flicked back to Landon, who stood frozen in the corner, his face as pale as a ghost. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps as he shook his head in disbelief. I swear, Dad, I didn't mean to." "Shut up!" Michael shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his grief. "Just shut up, both of you!" He could barely breathe, his chest heaving with the force of his emotions. He felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling, like his entire world was collapsing, and he had no way of stopping it. "Look at it," Michael spat, his voice sharp and broken. "Look at it, Landon. See what you've done." Landon's heart pounded as he stepped forward, his legs moving against his will. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one harder to take than the last. His eyes darted back to Isabella, who stood beside him, her face streaked with tears. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The weight of the truth hung between them like a dark cloud. Landon pressed play. The grainy footage flickered on the screen, and there he was, Landon, walking into the bedroom. It was unmistakable. The timestamp confirmed it, the dead of night, when he should have been asleep. And there, on the bed, was Isabella, his mother, his adoptive mother. She called his name softly, almost too quietly to hear. The sound sent a shiver down his spine. "No, no, no, no," Landon whispered under his breath, shaking his head violently, as if denying it would somehow change the truth in front of him. But the images kept playing, haunting him, each second of the footage tightening the knot of terror in his chest. He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember any of it. His mind was blank, a hollow space where these memories should have been. But the proof was right there. He had done this. Somehow, in some twisted, unconscious way, he had gone to her. Michael's voice cut through the haze, like a knife. "Do you still have nothing to say? No excuses? No more lies?" Landon's chest tightened as panic took hold. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His own father, the man who raised him, was looking at him with disgust, with anger, as if he were a stranger, someone unrecognizable. "I didn't mean to," Landon choked, barely able to get the words out. I don't remember anything." Michael's face twisted with rage. "You disgust me." And with that final blow, Landon's world shattered. He couldn't face this. He couldn't face his father, his mother, or what he had done. Without another word, he turned and bolted up the stairs, his legs moving on instinct. Behind him, he could hear Isabella sobbing, her voice calling after him, but it was too late. Landon slammed the door to his room and locked it, his heart racing in his chest. He leaned against the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls seemed to close in around him, suffocating him, trapping him in this nightmare. He slid to the floor, burying his face in his hands. The images from the video played over and over in his mind, each one worse than the last. He felt like he was drowning, lost in a sea of guilt and confusion, with no way out. Beneath him, he could still hear his parents fighting. Michael's voice rose in fury, demanding that Isabella leave the house immediately. He heard the sound of something crashing, maybe a chair, maybe a plate, but Landon couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the weight of what he had seen. Isabella's voice, desperate and broken, echoed through the house. "Please, Michael. Just give me a chance to explain. Please let me tell you the truth." Michael's response was harsh, filled with the raw pain of a man betrayed. "There's nothing you can say, Isabella. Nothing will change what I've seen." Isabella sobbed, her words tumbling out in a frantic plea. "He doesn't know what he's doing, Michael. He's confused. Please, just listen to me." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, Michael's voice, low and defeated, came through the stillness. "Fine, talk, but don't think for a second that I'll ever forgive you." In his room, Landon curled up tighter, his whole body shaking. He had no idea how they would get through this. The silence that followed Isabella's desperate plea was suffocating, thick with unspoken emotions and 1,000 unsaid words. Michael stood across from her, his face a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Isabella took a trembling step forward, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Michael," she began, her voice fragile, like it could shatter under the weight of her confession. "I never wanted to hurt you." Michael remained stone-faced, his expression unreadable, but his fists were clenched at his sides. The raw emotion, the confusion, the betrayal was bubbling just beneath the surface, threatening to explode at any moment. "I need you to understand," Isabella continued, her voice growing firmer, but still laced with desperation. "Landon, he hasn't been himself, not since the accident." Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to feel pity for the boy, his son, who had just upended his entire world. But Isabella pushed forward. "After his girlfriend died, he was devastated," she said, her eyes never leaving Michael's, pleading for him to understand. "You know how much he loved her. The grief, it broke him." Michael remained silent, but his breathing had become heavy, each inhale an effort to suppress the roiling emotions inside him. He started taking medication, antidepressants to help cope, Isabella explained. But it wasn't enough. He started having episodes, moments where he didn't know where he was or who he was with. He would wake up in the middle of the night, lost, confused, and he'd come to me. Michael flinched at the last sentence. The image of his son, their son, wandering into their bedroom in the dead of night, confused, seeking out Isabella as if she were someone else, twisted like a knife in his gut. He thought she was her, Isabella whispered, her voice cracking. In his mind, he wasn't in our house. He was back with her. He'd call me by her name, talk to me like I was her. Michael's stomach churned, the nausea creeping up his throat. "And you, what? You just went along with it?" Isabella lowered her head, shame flickering across her face. "I didn't know what else to do, Michael. He was so broken, so lost. I thought if I played along, maybe it would help him cope. Maybe. It would give him peace." "Peace?" Michael spat the word like it was poison. "You thought pretending to be his dead girlfriend would bring him peace." "I was trying to help him," Isabella cried, her hands gripping the sides of her head, as if trying to physically hold herself together. "I didn't know what else to do. He was in so much pain, and nothing else was working. I thought if I could just give him a little comfort." "At my expense?" Michael's voice trembled with rage, his eyes flashing with betrayal. "You thought it was okay to lie to me, to lie to him, to let this go on behind my back." Isabella's tears flowed freely now, her shoulders shaking. "It wasn't like that. I swear, Michael, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't know how to stop it." Michael turned away from her, unable to look at the woman who had been his partner for so many years. The woman who had shared his bed, his life, and now, this unbearable secret. His mind was racing, torn between anger, grief, and a twisted sense of pity for the boy upstairs. Isabella took a hesitant step closer, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "It wasn't physical, Michael. I swear to you. Nothing like that ever happened. It was all in his mind, his grief. He was sleepwalking, lost in his memories. It was never like that." Michael squeezed his eyes shut, his fists still clenched. Her words, her attempts to explain, were doing nothing to calm the storm inside him. He didn't know if he believed her, didn't know if he even could believe her. "But you let it happen," he finally said, his voice low and filled with hurt. "You let him do." Isabella's voice cracked again. "I thought it would help him. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to hurt him, or you." Michael turned back to her, his eyes blazing with emotion. "But you did hurt me, Isabella. You hurt both of us." Isabella sobbed softly, unable to meet his gaze. The weight of her actions seemed to finally crush her as she stood there trembling. The silence that followed felt like a knife, cutting through the room. Michael's thoughts were a chaotic mess. He understood now, on some level, what had happened. Isabella had been desperate to help Landon, desperate to ease his suffering, but in doing so, she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had lied to him, kept secrets, and worst of all, she had allowed their son to live in a fantasy built on pain. But despite his understanding, the disgust remained. The image of Landon, confused and broken, seeking comfort in Isabella, twisted in his mind. The boundaries of their family had been violated, not by malice but by tragedy, and somehow that made it worse. Michael's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke again. "I don't know how to move forward from this." Isabella didn't answer. She didn't have the words. She stood there waiting, hoping for some miracle that might mend what had been broken. The house was dark and quiet. The only sound the faint ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece. Michael lay on the couch, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night swirling in his mind. He hadn't moved in hours. His body numb, his heart heavier than it had ever been. Isabella had gone to bed, though he wasn't sure if she'd be able to sleep. He couldn't bring himself to go upstairs, to be near her or Landon. The very thought of seeing either of them made his stomach turn. But more than the anger, more than the disgust, what consumed Michael was the overwhelming sense of loss. He had lost something fundamental that night, not just his trust in Isabella, but something deeper, something harder to define. His family, his sense of home, had been irrevocably damaged. His mind kept going back to Landon. The boy had been through so much, more than Michael had ever fully understood. But could he forgive him? Could he look at Landon and not see the broken boy who had turned to Isabella in his grief, mistaking her for someone else? Could he ever see him the same way again? The questions gnawed at him, leaving him restless, sleepless. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Michael knew what he had to do. He had to talk to Landon. He had to understand, if not for himself, then for the sake of whatever was left of their family. With a heavy sigh, Michael rose from the couch, his body aching from the tension that had gripped him all night. He made his way upstairs, each step feeling like it carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. When he reached Landon's door, he hesitated, his hand hovering just above the knob. He knocked softly. "Landon?" There was no answer. Michael frowned, knocking again, this time louder. "Landon, we need to talk." Still no answer. His heart skipped a beat as dread began to settle in his chest. He turned the knob, pushing the door open slowly. The room was empty. Landon was gone. Michael's eyes scanned the room frantically, searching for any sign of where he might have gone. His breath caught in his throat when he saw the piece of paper lying on the bed, a letter hastily written and folded. With trembling hands, Michael picked it up and unfolded it, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. The early morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Landon's room, casting soft, broken shadows on the floor where Michael knelt. Beside him, Isabella stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless hours of worry. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet of the house, the stillness of the room, it felt too much. Michael glanced at Isabella, seeing the reflection of his own pain mirrored in her. The woman who had been his partner through so many trials, who had borne the weight of raising their adopted son with love, was now broken before him. And yet, in her eyes, he could see the same question that haunted him. How had it come to this? Michael's gaze returned to the letter, the words blurring momentarily as he fought back the tears that threatened to spill. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse as he began to read aloud. Mom. Dad. The first words already carried the weight of what was to come. He paused, his hand gripping the paper tightly. Isabella's breath hitched, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I'm sorry. I don't know where to begin except by saying that I'm sorry. I've hurt you both more than I can ever make right, and I don't know how to live with that. After Maria died, I wasn't myself anymore. I lost control of everything, and I know I hurt you both in ways that can't be forgiven. Michael's voice cracked slightly at the mention of Maria, the girl who had once been everything to Landon. Her loss had shattered their son, had sent him spiraling into the depths of despair they had not fully understood. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep reading. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I know that what I did, what happened between us, it wasn't right. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't in control. I swear, I didn't know what I was doing. The medication, the nightmares, the memories of Maria, it all mixed together, and I lost myself. I thought I was with her. I thought you were her. I know that sounds crazy, but in those moments, I couldn't see clearly. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Her shoulders shook as the weight of Landon's confession settled over them both like a dark cloud. Michael clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the letter. Each word felt like a blow, a painful reminder of the twisted reality they had been living. I can't stay here anymore. I can't look either of you in the eyes after what I've done. I'm ashamed. I'm broken, and I don't know how to fix it. The room felt colder, smaller, as Michael's voice lowered. He could barely see the words now, his vision blurred by unshed tears. He blinked rapidly, desperate to finish reading, even though every word cut deeper into his already bleeding heart. You both raised me as your own. You gave me a life I didn't deserve, and I'll always be grateful for that, but I can't stay. I can't keep hurting you. I need to go, to find myself, to figure out who I am outside of all this pain and guilt. I don't know if I'll ever come back, but I love you both. Please don't look for me. I need time. There was a pause as Michael reached the last line, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry I couldn't be the son you deserved. The letter slipped from Michael's hands and fluttered to the floor, the silence that followed almost unbearable. Isabella's sobs broke through the quiet, her body collapsing onto the bed as she buried her face in her hands, unable to contain the anguish that had been building inside her for so long. Michael stood motionless, his heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that they would find Landon, that they would fix this. But he couldn't. He didn't have the strength. Landon was gone, and with him the fragile hope that had once held their family together. Michael walked to the window, staring out at the empty street, his mind a whirl of emotions he couldn't untangle. The pain, the guilt, the anger, it was all too much. He pressed his palm against the cold glass, the weight of everything crushing him. Isabella's voice was soft, broken. We lost him, Michael. We lost him. Michael closed his eyes, the ache in his chest tightening until he thought he might break under it. He didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to make any of this right. All he knew was that Landon was gone, and the emptiness left behind felt insurmountable. It had been weeks, maybe months, Michael wasn't sure anymore, since Landon had left. The days had blurred together, a monotonous blend of silence and unanswered questions. Isabella had retreated into herself, spending most of her time in the garden, tending to the flowers that Landon had once helped plant. Michael, for his part, spent his time at work, trying to bury the thoughts that haunted him. But tonight was different. Tonight, they had both reached a breaking point. The silence, the avoidance, the unspoken grief between them. It couldn't continue. Not like this. Michael sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Isabella sat across from him, her eyes tired, her face drawn with the kind of sadness that had become all too familiar. They hadn't spoken much since Landon's letter, but now, finally, it was time. "I've been thinking," Michael began, his voice hesitant, unsure. Isabella looked up, her gaze heavy with exhaustion. "About? About us," he said quietly. "About everything." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She simply waited, her hands folded in her lap, bracing herself for what she knew was coming. "I don't blame you for what happened," Michael said, his voice steady but tinged with pain. "I know you were trying to help him. I know you were doing what you thought was right." Isabella blinked, her tears spilling over as she nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to stop it, Michael. I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't know what else to do." Michael sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I understand that now. But the trust between us, it's gone, Isabella, and I don't know if we can ever get it back." Isabella swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the floor. She had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "We've both been through so much," Michael continued, his voice quieter now. "But I think we both know that things will never be the same." Isabella nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I know," she whispered. I wish it hadn't come to this." Michael looked at her, his heart heavy. "So do I, but I think it's time. We need to let go." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Isabella closed her eyes, the tears falling freely now. "I never stopped loving you, Michael." "I never stopped loving you either," Michael said softly. "But sometimes love isn't enough." They sat in silence, the weight of their decision settling over them. It was the end of something beautiful, something once filled with hope. But now, all that remained was acceptance. Chapter 10. New Beginnings and Lessons on Love. The quiet of the mornings felt different now. Michael stood on his porch, staring at the soft light that filtered through the trees, sipping his coffee in solitude. He wasn't sure when he had last enjoyed this kind of stillness. Perhaps never. The house behind him felt vast and empty, a far cry from the bustling life it once held. But in the silence, there was a strange sense of peace, a calm that he hadn't expected. It had been months since the divorce, after everything had crumbled, his marriage, his family, and the trust he once held so tightly. Michael had been lost. The pain of losing Landon and Isabella had left him hollow, struggling to make sense of where it all went wrong. But now, as the days passed, he was learning how to rebuild, piece by piece. In the beginning, it had been unbearable. Each room of the house held memories that weighed him down, reminders of the life he had lost. He would walk past the photos on the wall, Isabella's favorite vase in the kitchen, Landon's old trophies collecting dust on the shelves, and feel a wave of grief so strong it knocked the breath out of him. He wanted to throw it all away, to erase every reminder of the life that no longer existed. But instead, he began the slow process of healing. Michael started with small things. He learned how to live alone, how to fill the quiet with something meaningful rather than letting it suffocate him. He took long walks through the neighborhood, spent time working on projects around the house, and reconnected with old friends he hadn't spoken to in years. It was a struggle, learning to live for himself again, but it was also a necessary step towards something new. Isabella had her own journey of healing. After the divorce, she had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, her first time living alone in years. The space felt foreign to her at first, too quiet, too small compared to the life she had shared with Michael and Landon. She spent the first few weeks immersed in sorrow, replaying every mistake, every painful moment. But eventually, she began to find her footing. Isabella started focusing on herself in ways she hadn't in years. She took up new hobbies, joined a local book club, and even started gardening on the small balcony of her apartment. Slowly but surely, she began to rediscover who she was outside of the roles of wife and mother. The wounds of the past didn't heal overnight, but every day they hurt just a little bit less. Despite the separation, there remained a bond between Michael and Isabella, a quiet understanding of the love they had once shared. It was a love that had been tested, stretched to its limits, but never fully disappeared. In their quiet moments of reflection, both Michael and Isabella carried the memories of the family they had once built together. They weren't bitter about it anymore. Instead, there was a sense of acceptance. They both hoped, in their own ways, that Landon would return. The weight of his absence was a constant presence, something they each carried alone. Michael would often find himself staring out the window, wondering if one day Landon would come walking back down the driveway, ready to heal, ready to face the past. Isabella, too, would glance at her phone, half expecting a message from her son, some small sign that he was okay, that he hadn't disappeared forever. They knew that if and when the time came, they would welcome him back with open arms. Landon's departure had left a void in both their lives, a space they couldn't fill, no matter how much they tried to move forward. But they also knew that some journeys had to be taken alone, and they hoped Landon was finding his way, wherever he was. Life had moved on, as it always does. Michael and Isabella, though separated, carried the lessons of their past with them. They had learned that love was not always enough to keep people together, that sometimes even the deepest bonds could be fractured beyond repair. But they had also learned that love didn't have to disappear just because the circumstances had changed. The love they had for Landon, and in a way, for each other, remained, though now it lived in the spaces between them, a quiet reminder of what once was. One afternoon, Michael received a letter. His heart skipped a beat as he saw the familiar handwriting on the envelope. He carefully opened it, his hands trembling slightly, and read the simple words inside. "I'm okay, I'm trying to figure things out. I'll come home when I'm ready. I love you both." Tears filled Michael's eyes as he read the message, the relief washing over him like a wave. He folded the letter carefully, holding it to his chest for a moment before placing it gently on the table. He knew it wasn't the end of their story. It was just another chapter, one filled with hope. The story had taken its toll, but as Michael stood on his porch that evening, watching the sun set over the trees, he realized that love, true, deep love, could weather even the hardest storms. He and Isabella had walked their separate paths, but they were forever connected by the life they had built together. The wounds were there, but so were the lessons, and for the first time in a long while, Michael felt ready to embrace whatever came next. And so, as the last light of the day faded, he stood with a quiet heart, knowing that some bonds could never be fully broken. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on this intense story. Now, of course, this is a work of fiction, but the emotional undertones hit close to home. In real life, many mothers would go to unimaginable lengths for their children, whether to protect them or help them heal. But sometimes, in doing so, those same actions can unintentionally cause harm. This story reminds us that even the best intentions can backfire if we lose sight of boundaries or the long-term consequences. A mother's love is powerful, but it must be balanced with wisdom. Otherwise, the very thing meant to nurture a child can end up damaging them in ways that are hard to repair. So, what do you think? What would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation about how far is too far when it comes to protecting the ones we love. And, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that make us reflect on the human experience.